Yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The SEC's recent climate rule proposal was 500 pages of mandatory disclosures that will now require companies to report on emissions data and climate risk management strategies. This proposal is a major concern for business owners back in my district who are worried. I'm a small business owner also about the SEC's recent push to implement costly environmental, social, and political regulatory requirements. They're not even relevant to the company. So the SEC's proposed climate requirements will cost companies millions of dollars to ensure they are properly compliant with these burdensome rules. This will force business owners to hire more lawyers and compliance officers rather than investing back in their employees and operations, which would help their businesses grow and bring more in revenue, and I've seen that happen in my business. So businesses are already struggling to operate within tight margins, and an increase in compliance costs could be their tipping point. And on top of that, the Scope 3 emissions disclosure will direct companies to speculate on the emissions output for their suppliers and products, which require substantial information to get a proper estimate. So this could lead to smaller businesses being left out due to how difficult it is for them to obtain this complex information. And the SEC crusade is extremely out of touch and exceeds their intended missions and statutory authority. So the SEC needs to stop their abuse of the rulemaking process before they cause any further damage to the industry. So, Mr. Chairman, what is the average amount of time and resources everyday companies will need to ensure they are properly complying with the excessive climate risk disclosures? And how can mandating companies to file on indirect emissions relating to their company provide consistent information for investors?
Again, and Mr. Boer, sitting behind you, asked a similar question. Let me just put it in context, if I may. Investors today are making investment decisions based on climate risk disclosures. We're trying to bring some comparability. Both you and other members have raised this question about greenhouse gas emissions, so-called Scope 3. And for the listening public, this is of the value chain. It's not about the company itself. It's about their suppliers or their customers. And we got a lot of comment in the public file about this, not just from members of Congress, but from small and medium-sized enterprises in your district and other districts, from farmers and ranchers and the like. We're taking a very close look at this. Our remit, our legal authority is about public companies. It's about the public companies. And over half of the top 1,000 are already making disclosures around their emissions. But we understood even in the proposal that so-called Scope 3 is less developed, is less used, and we got a lot of feedback, and we're taking that under consideration and looking at it very closely.
Because when you make small businesses smaller because of regulations,
yeah, and let me assure you, sir, and I've said this in a Senate hearing 2 weeks ago as well, our remit is just about those public companies. It's not the private companies in your district. My dad had a very small company, too. That's not the remit of the SEC.
All right. The SEC's rulemaking process is unprecedented, proposing over 50 rulemakings since the spring of 2021. The SEC has failed to understand the impact of these rules and how they will each affect the industry, as well as the aggregate amount or impact. It is crucial that the SEC conduct cost-benefit analysis and solicit industry feedback of these proposals and what it will cost for the participants that the Commission oversees. I was proud to sign on to a letter led by Chairman McHenry to you highlighting our concerns with rulemaking agenda and substantial volume. It's vital that the SEC understands the regulatory and financial burdens that they are unjustly placing on market participants, just like we talked about. So in closing, Chair, has the SEC engaged in any roundtables, field hearings, or investor testing to really solicit feedback before rulemaking?
Again, it was good to read your letter about 8 p.m. last night. It was a good letter. But in terms of your question, we solicit feedback in the formal way through the comment period. We solicit feedback and have hundreds of meetings, sometimes on any one rule, with market participants, and then we detail them in the files, and we benefit from that feedback.
Well, thank you. I yield my time back.